It's been quite a while, hasn't it? Before I start, I just want to mention that this is the second part of my first video about Archaludon in the TCG, and I highly recommend watching it first. It talks about my process for building Archaludon up to this point, so this video will assume you have a basic understanding of what the deck archetype does. Link in the description if you want to watch. In summary, I spent months revising my Archaludon deck, making 9 different versions total, only to get obliterated once I was finally satisfied. I didn't let that get to me though. Archaludon and I were going to come back stronger. After a little break, of course. Yeah, I spent a month or two using some other random decks like this weird Azumarill flavored Terra Box and Ethan's Typhlosion. None of them had the sauce though, not like Archaludon. But one day, I received a message that would change everything. A Blue Sky user named Pokemon Crossroads sent me an image of their own Archaludon deck list, and I must say, my interest was piqued. I copied the list and took it to a casual league night at my local and won every single game I played. The difference was like night and day. Of course, I immediately started tinkering with it, making some swaps that I felt fit the deck better. So without further ado, I present Archaludon version 13.1. Of course, we have a 4/4 line of the bridge. This is an important component of making an Archaludon deck. His pet fish is also here. Relicanth allows him to access Duraludon's Raging Hammer attack to reflect damage back onto the opponent, as well as an Iron Bundle for gusting. Squawkabilly EX is here to help us set up quickly. For a while, I actually ran 2 of this bird to save myself from bad prizing, but I eventually realized that he isn't mandatory to have a good game. Pheasantipity. I have a 1/1 line of Scizor for single prize attacking. Scizor heavily punishes decks like Gardevoir that put a ton of Pokemon with abilities on their bench, allowing it to reach up to 360 damage for 1 energy. Here's one of my favorite techs, a 1/1 line of Toedscool. This absolute fiend was added in response to a ridiculous statistic. 29% meta share for Golden Go at Worlds. This prevents the opponent from returning cards from discard to their hand. I did not have a good matchup into Golden Go without it. I also added in a one-off Carmine to help out when I go first. We also have 2 Professors and 3 Ionos for draw power and hand disruption. 2 Turos to scoop up damaged Archaludons before they die. 1 Black Belt training to hit higher damage numbers. 3 Boss's Orders to grab prizes off of liability EXs like Pheasantipity and Mew. I swapped the Ace spec from the original list, and this was honestly a very difficult change for me to make. The original list used Scoop Up Cyclone, which is an amazing card for this deck. Being able to recycle an Archaludon and still use Boss's Orders, for example, is so strong. But if this card was in my opening hand, it was absolutely useless. It would get discarded by Squawkabilly instantly and get 0 value. That's why I changed it to Secret Box. Discarding 3 cards isn't that big of a deal whenever I'm likely going to be discarding my entire hand anyway. Plus, it allows me to set up my tools in Stadium easily, while also searching out Carmine if I go first. There is a reason this card is worth $18. When it comes to items, it was pretty integral to run as many copies of each as possible since there was a chance I would discard several of them with Squawk and Carmine. So, we have 4 Nest Balls, 4 Ultra Balls, 3 Pokegears, and 3 Earthen Vessels. I run a one-off Palpad to hopefully be able to recycle some wasted supporters as well. Sometimes this one also goes to waste, but being able to rig the deck with it late game is pretty fun. And for the last of the items, I also have 4 Night Stretchers. Now it's time for the gimmick of this build. This deck runs 2 Rigid Bands and 2 Full Metal Labs. Both of these cards reduce incoming damage to Archaludon by 30, meaning it could be taking a total of 60 damage less from attacks. While this makes it harder to hit high numbers with Relicanth, it makes it a lot easier to stop dying. I have ruined the days of many Golden Go and Raging Bolt players by making them need just 1 more energy than usual, and denying the 1-hit KO because of it. This damage reduction build is what Archaludon is all about. When it all gets set up, I feel untouchable. Oh, and also there's 8 basic metal energies. Here, let me clean this up a bit. I ran this version of the deck for a while, making 1 or 2 card changes here and there. For a little bit, I absolutely dominated my locals. I even managed to come in 4th and 2nd place at 2 separate League Cups. And just for the record, the only reason I came in 2nd and not 1st place was because during the 1st place match, I announced Flip the Script when I wasn't allowed to and got penalized for it, even though I had game all but guaranteed on the following turn. This deck felt like it had very few weaknesses, but still fell victim to the most dangerous counter of all: not reading the cards. In my 4th place run, my only losses were to Cynthia herself, of course piloting the Cynthia's Garchomp deck. Let me tell you, this is the worst possible matchup for Archaludon. With 400 HP, Garchomp is just absolutely impossible to get rid of. Spiritomb also punishes, leaving any damage counters on Garchomp, which, as you can imagine, for a Pokemon that deals 220 damage with its attack, is not great. In all seriousness, this player is also just really good at the game, which absolutely didn't help this already basically unwinnable matchup. Shout out to them for being so good at Garchomp that it spawned a Pocket Grass-type meta at my local. Most importantly though, I was just having a ton of fun. This deck played so well into a lot of meta picks, like Grimmsnarl and Dragapult, which mostly played off of chip damage. Even Gardevoir players were having trouble finding ways to kill my immortal bridges. Unfortunately, I feel like the introduction of Mega Evolutions and the next standard rotation would kill this deck off for good this time. I mean, we're losing Nest Ball. I can't possibly fathom how this deck would work without Nest Ball, so I wanted to put Archaludon to the test. And in a couple months, a Pokemon Regional would be coming to Pittsburgh, PA. And what better place for the Bridge's last hurrah than the Steel City itself? So I woke up at 6 a.m. on the morning of the event, got in the car, and drove to Pittsburgh. And that is how we got here. I got to my seat for round 1 kind of early. The tournament was set to begin at 8:30, so I just had to wait a bit before it officially began. I had never been to such a large event before and my nerves were really starting to get to me. But then it hit 8:30 and it still didn't start. And then it was 9 and it still didn't start. Me and my opponent basically just looked at each other in awkward silence for almost a full hour before the tournament finally began at 9:30. So round 1 finally begins and we both flip our Pokemon over. I was against the newly discovered Joltik Goldengo combination, which relied on getting an early lead with Brian hands and then finishing the game with Goldengo. No worries, I have my new friend Toedscool to keep Goldengo from getting that energy back. I played Toedscool on the bench and oh, he's dead to Ampy very much. No worries, I have my Night Stretcher to get him back. And my opponent had another boss in hand, and now Toedscool has cost me 4 prize cards. I can't say this was my best idea in the world, so I scooped and went to Game 2. Game 2 begins, and he starts as any Joltik deck usually would, and attaches to Joltik with Brian on the bench. He pulls 2 grass energies out of his deck, and only 1 electric energy. He did not have enough. That meant the rest of his electric energy was prized, which meant his entire game plan was in shambles from the get-go. It was too late to start getting up Goldengos, as his entire first turn was devoted to setting up Brian, and I was able to take the game by leaving all of his energy stuck on his Pokemon, unable to be used for Goldengo's attacks. Game 3 is where a common enemy of this tournament rears its head into the battle: the timer. You see, at Pokemon Regionals, you only have 50 minutes to complete a best of 3 set. By the time we reached Game 3, there were only about 5 minutes left on the clock. Obviously, this is not enough time to finish a game, especially with a slow-playing deck like Archaludon, and since both of us had won prior, this set was ruled a draw. Now that round 1 is over, this is a good point to talk about the frenzy at the start of every round. On the screen, you'll see footage of me trying to walk to my table, as there were almost 2,000 setups spread out across the entire venue. The TOs do not give people a lot of time to set up, as the time spent walking to your table is part of your setup time, and an event of this size has to follow a strict schedule if you ever want to be able to go home. So, after a very short break, round 2 begins and my opponent flips over a Cyndaquil. At first, I was kind of worried about potentially losing the prize trade on single prizes, but I quickly realized how good of a matchup this actually was for me. Not only did Typhlosion never have a one-shot on me due to Metal Defender removing Archaludon's fire weakness, but it also relies heavily on reusing lost Typhlosions. Unlike round 1, Toedscool actually came in handy here. There wasn't a whole lot of interesting gameplay in this set. I won and it wasn't very close. My round 3 opponent was playing Terrabox. This is also a fantastic matchup for me. I never have any need to bring out Relicanth against this deck, as most of what Terrabox runs is 220 HP or lower. Game 1 was a complete wash with me taking the win by chaining Boss's orders. Game 2 started similarly, but once we were down to 2 prizes each, we had an issue. Both of us needed just 1 card to take the win. For me, either an Archaludon or a Night Stretcher, so I could take the KO on the opposing Wellspring Ogremon. And for them, 1 more Water Energy so they could Torrential Pump for game. I had cleared my board of any 2 prizes in order to intentionally make this their only option to take this win. About 5 or 6 turns went by of us just drawing and passing, and it had me sweating at this point. The entire fate of this round, resting exclusively in what we top decked, was nerve-wracking. But then, my extreme shuffling skills pulled through, and I grabbed a Night Stretcher off the top deck, allowing me to evolve and take the win. Round 4 was actually really bad for me. My opponent was playing Palt Charizard, so not a fantastic matchup. In the first game, I had Squawkabilly and 2 Archaludons prized, and my opening hand had no search cards. I was pretty much guaranteed cooked instantly, but I got bailed out super hard here. My opponent played Arven, and after searching out an item and a tool, he went to add those cards to his hand, which was now nowhere to be seen. So, while sifting through his deck, it seemed he had inadvertently mixed his whole hand back into his deck, and I was unfortunately forced into a position where I had to call a judge. I don't like to take games this way, but it wasn't a game state that could be recovered faithfully. Game 2 was a lot more back and forth. I tried very hard to prevent him from setting up Charizard, since it was the only thing capable of one-shotting the bridge. For most of the game, this worked, since Dragapult hitting into the bridge would risk a Fish OKO. But unfortunately, I ran out of resources and was unable to take the game. It all came down to Game 3, and once it started, it ended. The timer really does not like when people go to Game 3. Alright, it's time for round 5, and this was probably one of the worst sets I've ever personally experienced. My opponent was running a typical Gardevoir deck. I got unlucky off my opening hand, but was able to get back into the game. Unfortunately, this meant all I could do was defend. I noticed my opponent was also bricking a bit and drawing lots of cards as well. So 4 or 5 turns into the game, I asked to count their deck. At this point, I counted out 13 cards. I remember thinking to myself in this moment, yeah, I could stall for 13 turns. And stall I did. My opponent could not take any KOs or get any resources they needed to take a multi-prize turn. All they could do was slowly chip away with Monkey Dory. 13 turns later, my opponent drew the last card of their deck. They slammed down the card immediately. I stared at the Iono on the table, devastated that my stall was unsuccessful. They were able to finish the game off with Monkey Dory damage. This ended up being the only game in the set, as it had taken a total of 45 minutes to complete. Now it was time for round 6. My opponent was running Dragapult Dusknoir. By this point in the day, I was already very tired. It was about 2 p.m. and all I had eaten were some Pringles and packs of Lance crackers. In fact, I was so tired that all I had written down for the events of this game is, I drew very bad and died. We were all very much looking forward to our planned dinner at Raising Cane's after the event wrapped up. But there was still a game 2, and we had a much closer back and forth in this one. However, at just 2 prizes remaining, my opponent had a trick up their sleeve. By playing a Jamming Tower, both forms of damage reduction on my bridge would be disabled at once. This enabled a freshly benched Archaludon to secure the kill with the help of a Dusclops killing itself for 50 extra damage. Also, I just wanted to point out at some point during this game, my opponent tried to attach a Dracloak to another Dracloak, and neither of us noticed until a couple actions later. Like I said, we were all very tired. Round 7 begins, and I am against a Raging Bolt. I found out that this matchup is surprisingly pretty good for me as long as I set up properly. I'm able to boss in Teal Masks repeatedly to keep its energy down, and also get OKOs to stay in the prize race. Unfortunately, Game 1 is the only game where I set up properly. In the other 2 games, I led with only Relicanth and had no search or supporters in my hand. Both of these led to a very quick dunk from the Raging Bolt player, finishing the set with 20 minutes to spare and being the fastest set I had experienced that day. Even though I didn't want to lose, I was very thankful for the longer break though, especially because the next round would be the last for the day. It was against yet another Raging Bolt. In Game 1, I once again bossed Teal Masks repeatedly to take the win. It's a pretty simple game plan when it takes so much energy for Raging Bolt to kill me. But once again, in Game 2, I started with just one Duraludon with no searcher supporters in hand and got dunked on the the opponent's first turn. Unfortunately, the last game of the entire tournament would be pretty anticlimactic. We once again would not have enough time to finish. We each got down to 2 prizes left, but when the timer ended, we realized neither of us could win. At this point, neither of us would benefit from another tie, so I decided to just concede the match before ending my turn, because I was really hungry, and I just wanted to go to Raising Cane's.
Real Caniac hours.
After I was done rejuvenating over an absolutely scrumptious meal, I reflected on my gameplay that day. Even though it was a personal goal of mine to make day 2, I was super proud of how well I played for my first regional, with a final record of 2 wins, 4 losses, and 2 ties. I went into this tournament with the goal to prove that Archaludon could stand up to the strongest decks in the format. But rather than obsess over whether or not I could prove that my pet deck is better than it seems, I realized I was just happy to have been there. At the time of making this video, the Pittsburgh Regional was the biggest Pokemon regional ever, and I got to be one of the thousands and thousands competing to be the best. It was truly an experience unlike any other, and I got to do it with my favorite deck alongside both friends and family. Anyway, the next day, we returned to play some side events. While I don't plan on sharing every single game I played at those side events, I will say that they were super fun and a much more casual side of the event for sure. I even got enough prize tickets to buy some plushies. Definitely wish I could have played more side events, but I'm still happy with what we got to do. And hey, I even found this free monkey dory laying around on the ground in the convention center. I hope someone important didn't lose it in between rounds or something. So what will I be doing next? For one, I'm obviously going to continue playing. This game is still super fun and my local Pokemon community is awesome. As for what deck I'm going to focus on, I think it's better that I try to spice things up a little bit. After all, Mega Evolution is about to introduce a whole lot of new options to the game, and I think this bridge has long since earned its rest. Wait, stop scrolling the background for a second. Whose deck list is this? Yeah, so it turns out this video took so long to edit that Archaludon is actually good again post-Megas. This build uses Risky Ruins and Monkey Dory to build up damage, and even uses Mega Mawile to help close out games. Looks like I get a little more longevity out of my bridge after all. Special thanks to all my besties for coming to regionals with me. Thank you for watching.